Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Snam's 2016 9-month results presentation. I will give you a brief overview of the most significant operational, corporate, and financial highlights. I will then hand over to Alessandra Pasini, who recently joined Snam as CFO, to comment on the results. Alessandra knows Snam extremely well, having worked on the company's IPO in 2001 and having been a key financial advisor to Snam for some of the most strategic projects in recent years. Let me start with an overview of gas demand in Italy. In the first 9 months of 2016, gas consumption was up 2.3% versus the same period in the previous year, adjusted for the weather. This is encouraging after a long period of declining demand. Growth in the power sector is driven by the low price of natural gas, which makes gas more competitive for power generation. Demand has also been supported by lower imports of electricity from France and lower hydroelectric production. The industrial sector also shows the first signs of a recovery, and in the residential sector, performance has been in line with expectations. The recovery of demand in 2016 is a good sign for the Italian industry and, of course, for our sector. We expect this trend to continue in Q4. In this environment, Snam made important operational progress. Starting with transport, our investment program continues in line with our targets. We have more than 600 ongoing projects in Italy. The reverse flow development that will foster the interconnection with Europe and transform Italy from a destination market to a transit country is expected to be completed by 2018. Meanwhile, the new balancing regime is in place since the beginning of October, with incentives linked to the promotion of efficient functioning of the balancing markets. In storage, working gas reached a maximum peak of almost 12 BCM, supported by favorable regulation, with 100% of working gas conferred. Since 2008, we've registered an annual increase of 5% in working gas. In LNG, we continue to see extremely significant price differentials between summer and winter. As expected, low summer prices have generated new LNG demand. As a consequence, the Panigaglia terminal returned to operation with 4 cargoes arriving between May and June. Moving now to the corporate activity. Last week, we completed the demerger of Italgas in advance of our stated target of doing it by the end of the year. Snam is now in an even better position to pursue our value creation strategy. Following the demerger, we have also reviewed our internal organization, evolving from a holding company with dedicated subsidiaries to an integrated group with centralized operations. This is allowing us to shorten reporting lines, reduce the duplication of activities, and enhance the synergies. We have also completed a significant liability management exercise, taking advantage of the low interest rate window after the summer to further improve our debt structure following the demerger. As Alessandra will explain in more detail, we have completed a bond repurchase program and issued new debt, lowering the cost of debt as well as improving our maturity profile. Lastly, we have recently activated the share buyback program authorized by the AGM and have signed an agency agreement for up to 4 months. Among the highlights of the third quarter, we have also signed an agreement to buy 49% of Gas Connect Austria from OMV. The deal was carried out in partnership with Allianz, and the stake will be held in a leveraged vehicle where Snam and Allianz will have equal governance rights. The total equity investment for Snam is in the region of 130 million euros. This investment will enable Snam to further strengthen our presence in Austria, where we already have 40 years of experience through TAG, which, as you know, we bought in 2014 for 519 million euros. A strong presence in Austria is important for us because the country, under any scenario in Europe, will remain a key transit hub for Europe and particularly for Italy. Turning now to our financial performance. The business performed well in Q3, in line with expectations and reflecting the new WACC for this regulatory period. CapEx was 5% higher compared to last year, reflecting the positive investment opportunities that we have to increase our RAB. Overall, we confirm the guidance provided in July for Snam, excluding Italgas, with 800 million euros of adjusted net income in 2016 on a pro forma basis, which for clarity represents numbers as if Italgas had demerged at the beginning of the year and includes our 13.5% stake in Italgas. I will now hand over to Alessandra, who will discuss her 9-month results in more detail.
Thank you, Marco, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm now going to focus on our financial results for the 9 months 2016 that, as you know, are not influenced by the effect of the Italgas demerger, apart from some non-recurring costs already arising, nor the recently completed liability management exercise. EBIT amounted to 1,296 million euro, recording a reduction of 12% compared to the same period of last year. This result mainly reflects the reduction of regulated revenues following the lower remuneration due to the WACC review on both transport and distribution, and the increase in depreciation due to new assets entering into operation. Positive contributions from higher storage regulated revenues and lower controllable fixed costs partially counterbalance those effects. EBIT reduction was partially mitigated by the positive contribution of a lower net financial expenses for 22 million euro, despite lower capitalized interest for 7 million euro, following the continuous optimization of our financial structure, leading to a net profit of 783 million euro, corresponding to a reduction of 11.8% versus the same period of last year. The cash flow from operation fully financed net investment, including those related to TAP, resulting in a positive free cash flow of 669 million euro and in a net debt at the end of the period of 14 billion euro. Now I'll give you some more color on the EBIT reduction in the period. Regulated revenues, net of pass-through items, showed a reduction of 108 million euro, mainly due to the well-known WACC reduction in transport from 6.3 to 5.4, worth 103 million euro, and distribution business from 6.9 to 6.1, worth 38 million euro. As the positive contribution of new investments was counterbalanced by the effect of depreciation and tariff adjustment related to the RPX-1. Storage regulated revenues recorded an increase of 33 million euro due to the positive contribution of the regulatory WACC increase from 6 to 6.5% and to the entry of operation of the Bortolano site at the end of 2015. All in, the effect of the change in WACC on regulated revenues was around 121 million for the period. Controllable fixed costs decreased by 4 million euro, confirming our strong focus on efficiency in a context of continuing business expansion and benefiting from a slight increase of capitalized internal costs due to higher investment activities. The significant performance in the period makes us confident to confirm a level of controllable fixed costs substantially flat in real terms for the full year 2016 at constant perimeter of activity. The increase in depreciation of 36 million euro was primarily due to asset entering into operation in transportation and storage businesses. Other effects of around 36 million euro refer to some increase in other costs, mainly related to the one-off Italgas demerger, worth 10 million euro, capital losses for 6 million euro, which 5 related to the distribution business for the replacement of metering devices, and net risk fund provision amounting to 4 million euro, of which 1 million related to the distribution business. Turning to the net profit performance, 9 months 2016 period recorded a reduction of 105 million euro from 888 million to 783. The decrease was mainly driven by the previously commented reduction in the EBIT, partially offset by lower net interest expenses of 22 million euro. The positive impact of a lower average cost of debt, which allowed to achieve an improvement of 39 million euro, was partially mitigated by some non-cash items mainly related to lower interest during construction following the significant amount of investment entering into operation last year. The increasing contribution of associates for 2 million euro was mainly due to TIGF, partially offset by the negative contribution of TAP related to the construction phase of the project. The tax rate for the period was around 31.3%, in line with expectations. Let me now give you an overview of Snam debt structure. As regards to debt breakdown, the fixed rate portion at the end of the quarter was 58%, a touch below our target to have two-thirds of our debt at fixed rate. This was the consequence of our decision to freeze most of our bond issuance plan in the course of 2016, pending the finalization of Italgas demerger. As a reminder, we repaid 150 million euro floating rate note in January and 700 million bond in July. But the liability management transaction that we conducted in October has addressed this point, as we will describe shortly. The maturity profile is well spread over time, avoiding major concentration issues going forward, with an average maturity of our medium to long-term debt of around 4.5 years. We continue to maintain strong focus on adequate committed lines provided by a large range of banks. At the end of the period, we maintain almost 6 billion of committed banking lines, in addition to our capital market exposure and institutional lender support. We remind you that, as mentioned at our first half results in June, we have signed amendment agreements to extend at the same cost the maturity of our 3.2 billion syndicated facilities. I also want to underline our continuous focus on treasury management optimization, testified by the important role played by uncommitted credit lines, which have allowed Snam to leverage the abundant market liquidity at favorable interest cost. This, combined with the full effect of the optimization measures carried out in the second half of last year, allows Snam to achieve an average cost of debt in the first 9 months of 2016 of circa 2.5%. Turning to the cash flow, funds from operation amounted to 1,686 million euro, with a positive contribution of working capital for 220 million euro, mainly related to net trade receivable in transport and distribution and tax payable accrued in the period. The cash flow from operation fully financed net investment of 1,017 million, including also the further investment related to our participation to TAP, resulting in a positive free cash flow of 669 million euro. Following the distribution of dividends for 875 million euro, the cash flow was negative for 206 million euro. Considering also 34 million euro of non-cash items, mainly related to fair value adjustment of financial debts, net financial debt at the end of the period amounted to 14 billion euro and 19 million, with an increase of 240 million as compared to year-end 2015. In October, we carried out a liability management exercise aimed at resizing and reshaping the debt structure, also in relation to the 3.6 billion euro intercompany debt repaid from Italgas at the merger. We bought 2.75 billion of outstanding bonds using a mix of available credit lines and proceeds from new issuances. As a result, we have increased the average maturity of our medium to long-term debt from 4.4 to 5.4 years. We smoothed the repayment schedule. We effectively, therefore, reduced refinancing risk for 2017, given the repurchase of 500 million bonds with 2017 maturity, and we accelerated the cost of debt reduction for the coming years. The exercise will result in a non-recurring charge on net profit in Q4 for circa 1.5 billion euro, net of the mark-to-market of Snam bonds previously allocated to Italgas for 0.1 billion. Following the 8.6 bond consent solicitation on 10th of October, Snam launched a tender offer on all of its outstanding bonds. On the 25th of October, Snam successfully completed the transaction, accepting to acquire 2.75 billion bonds in nominal amount. The average residual maturity of bought back bonds was 3.3 years, with an average yield of 3.8%. The deal, implying a 3.1 billion cash spent, was financed with a combination of new issuance for a total amount of 1.75 billion and banking line facilities for the balance. As for new issuances, Snam issued a 1.25 10-year bond with a maturity October 2026 with a 0.875 coupon, and a 500 million 4-year bond with a 0 coupon, maturity October 2020, the latter representing the lowest coupon ever paid by an Italian corporate. The average yield and maturity of the two bond issuance are respectively 0.7% and 8 years. Considering this liability management exercise, but also the recent announcement of an acquisition of a stake in Gas Connect Austria, we expect the net debt at year-end to reach circa 11 billion euro, excluding impacts on net working capital evolution related to the balancing mechanism, which just started in October, and the dynamics related to the payment to and from Cassa Conguaglio. With regard to debt structure and fixed to floating mix, this is expected to reach 2/3 of fixed at year-end, in line with our stated objectives. As for 2016 cost of debt, we reiterate our guideline of 2.5%, while being confident to achieve a better result at year-end due to the impact of our recently completed liability management exercise and further optimization measures. Thank you very much for your attention. We are now pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask a question at this time, please press star followed by the digit 1 on your telephone keypad. Please ensure that the mute function is switched off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. If you find that your question has already been answered, you may remove yourself from the queue by pressing star 2. Once again, please press star 1 to ask a question. We will pause for just a moment to allow everyone to signal. We will now take our first question from Harry Wyburd from Merrill Lynch. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. 3 questions from me, please. So, firstly, on the pro forma guidance for this year, which you've put at 0.8 billion, obviously that's to the nearest 100 million, so I wonder whether you could give us a slightly more narrowed down figure to the nearest 10 million. And then secondly, on that theme, you've been quite forthcoming so far in terms of your sort of long-term growth rates. Could you give us a rough idea right now of what kind of earnings growth or net income growth you're expecting going from 2016 to 2017? So that's the first question. And then the second one, on Gas Connect, please could you give us an idea of valuation on that deal, EV, EBITDA or PE? Just so we can get a sense for how much that costs you relative to earnings. And then final one's a slightly technocratic question. Your country risk premium will be marked to market at the end of 2018 as part of the WACC recalculation. Given what's happened to Italian bond yields in the last couple of weeks, could you update us on where the country risk premium would move to if you effectively mark to market that calculation today? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Harry. On the first point, I think what we say is we confirm the previous guidance, which was 800 million. So read 0.8 billion as 800 million straight. On the growth rates, we will update our longer-term growth rates as we present our new plan in spring. You may remember we highlighted some key areas for the growth coming from reduced cost of debt, coming from improved taxation rate, coming from some of the income from associates. Well, you can well imagine that a number of those will already impact 2017, particularly on the liability management, where the effort we took brings us ahead of the curve compared to the plan that we had. On GCA, I think what we can say is that the returns on this asset are in line with regulated returns, as we had previously signaled, and this is really our investment investment philosophy. And the regulation in Austria is now stable, I would say, so we've de-risked compared to before the summer that investment. On the country risk premium, the 2018 calculation will be quite mathematical, so there's no scope for change compared to the rule that has been set, which will look at a basket of bonds from corporates and companies, comparing Italy to some A-rated countries. And you're right in assuming that there would be an uplift taking the picture today. Of course, we will have to wait for the future to tell us where it will be, but certainly that represents an upside to the WACC.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Javier Suarez from Mediobanca. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Javier at Mediobanca. Thank you for taking my questions. I have a couple of them. The first one is on the refinancing exercise. We have seen the company increasing maturities, debt maturities, and increasing also the weight of fixed borrowing versus variable borrowing. I would just question myself if where do you see the target maturity level and fixed borrowing versus variable borrowing stabilizing. I just wanted to have a sense of the opportunity that you see to continue reducing the cost of debt at this stage, and if you do see the opportunity of extending maturities and extending also the variable borrowing within the company. The second thing is a follow-up on Austria Gas Connect. Can you share with us what you are assuming or your assumption when valuing the company on the next regulatory review for the company? Because if I'm not wrong, the company is going to suffer a regulatory review in 2017, something that may have affected your valuation of the company. So you can share any thought on that. That would be helpful. And the final question is if you can update us on the development and construction phase of TAP. Many thanks.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understood your first question, but if I have understood well, I'll try to answer it. I think the cost of debt will decrease naturally if variable stays close to where it is, because we have some expensive bonds that are still outstanding and that will expire naturally, and this will bring the cost curve down. We haven't done this exercise to restructure the fixed versus variable, which remains consistent with where we want it to be, also keeping in mind the regulation and the regulatory windows. And so that would be my answer for the first point. On Gas Connect, there will be a new regulation that starts from January 2017. The full impact of which is more or less known to the experts. The decree, the draft decree is in its final stages. This was a key element of the valuation. I would say that there's been a postponement in the transaction that means that we've de-risked this. So our valuation fully takes into account the new regulation, which sees quite a significant cut to the profitability of the business, but that's fully reflected in our numbers and consistent with what's happening in other countries. On TAP, I would say that the project is progressing well on all fronts. There are some issues that we are dealing with in Italy. We're collaborating and working as TAP, but also as Snam with all the local authorities as well as the national authorities. So that's what I would say. We confirm startup in 2020. That's it.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Cosma Pansacchi from Bernstein. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for taking my questions. I have two. One regards the recent announcement that you made on your investment in the CNG infrastructure, looking at the JV with Iveco and FCA. if I'm not mistaken, you are talking about a 200 million euros investment, which will be linked also to the publishing by the Italian government of the DAFI. So I was wondering, first of all, which type of return are you expecting from this investment? And second, when do you see the DAFI being finally approved? And of course, given that Mr. Steger has recently stated that this will be managed through a separate company, why are you looking to create a separate company for this airport? The second question regards instead a recent presentation by Mr. Calenda, the Minister of Economic Development in the Italian Parliament, in which he highlighted that one of the key points of the energy policy for next year will be creating a gas liquidity corridor that will be managed by a regulated subject and will control the capacity between the European hubs and the PSV. So I was wondering if Snam would be involved in this, and if yes, if you see any upside from this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. On CNG, well, first, we haven't decided to invest 200 million. What we've announced is an important alliance and our willingness, either on our own or potentially in partnership, to invest up to 200 million in the infrastructure for CNG. A big part of the infrastructure being what in Italy is known as the allacciamento, which is the physical connection from our own network to the service station where we install the CNG pump. We would only invest, so this part would have a regulated return because it's a RAB enhancing activity, the same as if we were connecting a new factory or a new shop or a new home. The additional investments that we could decide to make are in the distribution infrastructure, so the compressor and storage of CNG inside the petrol station. We would look at a model where we essentially lease this to the oil companies that own and operate the petrol station. So we would not take any, I would say, commercial risk, and we would only invest if we can make a return, which on a risk-adjusted basis is higher than our regulated return. If it's fully contracted, I consider it comparable to regulation because these would be long-term contracts with leading credit-worthy oil companies, essentially. Regarding a separate company, it's an option. No decision has been taken. Certainly a separate company would allow this business to have more opportunity maybe to bring on board new partners, but it's not a decision that we have taken. In fact, we're hiring right now some managers to come and propel this business. The DAFI we expect to be approved in the coming weeks. Our decision to support CNG, where, just as a reminder, Italy has a world-leading expertise. We have close to 1 million natural gas cars already on the streets. We think that by investing in and developing more distribution capacity, the car number will grow significantly. And this has all sorts of benefits, not only environmental benefits, because a natural gas car has almost zero pollutants on those particulates, which is what really creates the diesel pollution, but also it's cheaper. A natural gas car costs almost half than a petrol car today in Italy to run. So you have economic saving, environmental saving, and it's clearly a pro-competitive initiative. We don't need DAFI technically to begin because, as I said, this is a market that already exists. Certainly DAFI helps to create a more level playing field between gas and electric. We always say that this is not in any way an effort to challenge the electric car. This is an effort to reduce the use of diesel, which after the diesel gate is an issue that is now on the table. Talking of energy policy, moving to your second question around Calenda. Certainly Snam, and I mentioned this earlier when I talked about the balancing services, will play a growing role in supporting and promoting the liquidity and the proper functioning of the PSV as a hub. This will enable us to turn Italy from a destination market to a transit market, will enable Italy to have more competition and to bring prices of gas down more in line with northern hubs. Our benchmark in our example is what has happened in the TTF, for example, which is a smaller market than Italy, but with a hub that is significantly more liquid than all the other hubs. So as there are several initiatives, the one you mentioned could be one of them, but there are several initiatives where Snam takes a bigger role to promote the balancing and the liquidity on the PSV. We don't expect material returns from this activity, but we do expect some returns, some of which have already been published in the decree regarding the balancing, which is, let's say, the beginning of this activity. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Pablo Cuadrado from HSBC.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Some of my questions have been already answered, but I will have another two quick questions. The first one is that is related to Q4 performance and whether you can confirm if we should expect any negative one-offs or non-recurring items linked to the liability management process and the debt repurchase, or even the demerger process, if we should expect any negative item coming during Q4. And the second question is on the net debt outlook. I think it was mentioned during the presentation that the guidance for year-end is expected at 11 billion, excluding the demerger. I was wondering whether you can confirm that 11 billion includes the payment for Gas Connect Austria, and also if that 11 billion assumes any significant movement on the working capital versus what we have seen in 9 months. Thank you.
Okay, so I will start and then I will hand over to Alessandra. She has more details. Regarding the Q4, certainly the numbers include both Gas Connect and the liability management in terms of the guidance given, and you should expect probably around 5 million of extra non-recurring costs of Italgas that we said were around 15 million, of which 10 already in the first 9 months. I don't know, Alessandra, if you want to add something around the working capital.
Yeah, also on the liability management exercise was the other question. Yes, we will have a hit in the Q4 for net 0.15 billion. This is net of the mark-to-market of the debt that was assigned to Italgas or allocated to Italgas. So that number, the 0.15, is the net expected hit that we will see in Q4. On the debt, as I said, the 11 billion euro do include the cost of the GCA acquisition, and only factors the expected course of business, but do not include the possible swings in net working capital related to the new balancing system, which has just started in October. So that number does not factor any possible movement or adjustment that may come out of the new balancing system just starting now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Enrico Bartoli from MainFirst. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. A few questions on my side. First of all, back on the cost of debt, you provided this guidance of 2.5. I'm wondering for 17, is it fair to assume more or less the same number, or you think that you are having additional opportunities to reduce your cost of debt? A second question is related, if you can update us on where you are in terms of screening of the market, in terms of external additional growth opportunities, if you are just in, let's say, in a screening phase of, or if there are any discussion on some specific targets that you are having. And finally, a very general question, just to have your opinion about possible impact on the European gas market, on the political changes in the US, and if you think that there could be some possible opportunities or threats for the strategy of Snam at European level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, there will be an improvement of around 20 basis points, and we can give more accurate data in the full year results going forward for what the curve will look like in the plan. But I think this exercise should weigh for about 20 basis points improvement on the cost of debt. Regarding the external growth, we don't comment on specific situations. It's fair to say that we have an open-minded approach, but maintaining our very strict and selective investment criteria. Regarding the impact on the European gas market, certainly Europe is more and more convinced of the opportunity and probably requirement to create an energy union and to create a single gas market. And a number of our initiatives, including the reverse flow, the MidCat project between Spain and France, some of the TAP certainly, all go into that direction. So the more time we spend with the policymakers at the national level and at the European level, the more we are convinced that our strategy of working to create more liquidity and more interconnectivity in Europe is the right one. And what has happened to the LNG market this summer that we expect will be replicated almost for every summer, where you have a number of cheap cargoes really coming to Europe, mean that the opportunity and the requirement to create more interconnectivity between European markets is now more and more a strategic priority, which is positive for us. Not as much for our business as usual, which is, as you know, independent of these changes, but creates additional investment opportunities in assets that not necessarily require a big premium, that we can participate in open seasons or greenfield projects. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Monica Girardi from Barclays. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hello, everybody. I just have three questions. The first one is, you can provide us three indicators of sign.
Monica, sorry if I interrupt you. The voice is very low. We can't hear you. Can you
hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So three quick questions. The first one is on the equity accounted associates. If you can just give us the breakdown amongst all of the different investments there in 9 months. The second one, again, looking at the 9-month capex, can you provide us the amount of capex that you allocated to TAP? And lastly, I don't know if you are able to give this number to us, but I was wondering if you can just tell us how much of the share buyback has been completed as of today, given that you launched last week. Thank you.
So I'm afraid on all questions we don't typically give all this level of detail. On the buyback, the easy answer is you will see a press release tomorrow telling you exactly where we are. Don't expect too significant a start. We have mandated a third party to execute this, as I said, for a period of up to 4 months. Regarding the equity associates, I think you will find all the details. I don't know, Alessandra, if you want to give some color, but
I think just worthwhile saying that the trend is in line with what you have seen in the first 9 months of 2015, with, as I said before, just a small change of 2 million.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Oliver van Dusselare from Exane. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yes, thank you very much. I know it's a complicated name. Thank you for taking my questions. I've got actually two. First one, obviously, you already commented on possible M&A. I was just wondering if strategically you think there's maybe certain specific axes where you think you still need to work on or strengthen yourself if you really want to have that position in Europe that you are looking for. And I'm thinking notably that, as you said, you're very well positioned in Austria. You're well positioned also on in the connection between France and Spain through TIGF. I was wondering if there's more access that you're looking at. And in that context, I had read in the press, Mr. Alvera, that you had gone to Russia to meet with Gazprom. I was wondering what kind of cooperation you could see coming out of talks like that. And then my second question was, you have already hinted at a potential decrease in remuneration on the Austrian subsidiary because of the regulatory review that is ongoing. I was wondering to what extent we have details there, if we actually know already now by how much the allowed return will be reset. And I think there's something similar happening also at TIGF in France. I was wondering if there you have visibility on the future allowed return. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I would like to stress again that we do not need to do anything. So we look at growth in a very positive mindset. There's no place where we need to be in order to execute our strategy. Our strategy is 100% neutral and independent of, let's say, of the incremental growth. I would be surprised if there's a big TSO let's say physically or indirectly connected to Russia as we are, that hasn't gone to meet Gazprom. So I consider it part of our day-to-day activity to meet with the big suppliers of gas to Europe. So I wouldn't have anything extraordinary to report on that, nor to create any expectations. Regarding regulation, the details, as I said, are in a draft bill that was shared with the operator, so is not public information in Austria. In France, there has been a decrease, there will be a decrease on the transport WACC. The storage, which for us is an interesting part of the performance of TIGF, was expected to move from a merchant to a regulated storage. This is likely not going to happen from the 1st of January, so we will have a downside on the transport that was fully envisaged in our business plan, and probably some upside on the storage side, at least for 2017. I would say there's probably a slight downside on the transport and a slight upside to the storage compared to what we had envisaged earlier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now take our next question from Maurice Choi from Royal Bank of Canada. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Three quick ones for me. The first one's on debt refinancing costs. I might have mistaken on this one, but you said it's 0.15 billion for Italgas refinancing, if I'm not correct. And I guess that is different from the cost of refinancing through the bond buybacks that you just completed, which is around 300 million. Is that correct, or am I mistaking something here? The second question is whether or not you could just share with me, how can I justify, or how do you justify buying GCA, which I guess look through you own 20%, and you also own close to 90% of TAG. Is there any synergies of holding two different stakes in two different companies, or is there an opportunity here for you to actually merge these two companies together? Otherwise, how do we justify having two different stakes other than the fact that they are held in the same country? The third point, and this is a little bit more far-fetched, back in, I guess, multiple years ago, you had obviously a partnership with Fluxys, and you still do today, and there was an initiative to try to combine the international stakes together. I wonder if that discussion was ever reignited again in recent months, or is it still off the table? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would answer the second two, and then let Alessandra give you more details on the debt restructuring costs that are a combination of money we spent to do the buyback and economic impact of that, and money we gained through the Italgas process. But Alessandro will give you the details. On Gas Connect, this is what was for sale. We looked at it, and it was interesting, and there is certainly more synergy there than in other situations. I would always remind ourselves when we talk about these things internally, this is not a business with great synergies, so we don't expect significant synergies. There's some technological synergies. We see Austria, for instance, has a cutting-edge approach to electric compressor capacity, which can be used in other markets where we are, including Italy. So there's some technology transfer. There's some synergy. Down the line, there's some scope for further consolidation. Nothing specific. We haven't agreed or discussed anything at this stage. But this is the logic behind the deal, is the one we talked about. Regarding Fluxys, I would say that we have a good relationship with Fluxys. We are partners together in TAP. We spend quite a lot of time discussing TAP as well as other European issues, including CNG and mini LNG and other points of common interest. I would say there are not that many TSOs, so we collaborate with each other with the purpose of creating this European energy union and some north-south corridors. So that's the update that I would give at this stage. Thank you. Alessandro on the debt.
As it relates to the first question, if I well understood, I think there are two different phenomena that we want to describe. On one side, we bought back 2.75 billion bonds, and we spent in doing this 3.1 billion euro, and we used 1.75 from new issuances to bonds, plus 1.35 of credit lines. The charge, if you wish, or the cost is the difference between the nominal amount and the cash we spent, which net of tax was also offset by mark-to-market movement of 0.1 billion euro that was coming from bonds that were assigned to Italgas, but just as the mark-to-market were reported in this context. This is a consequence, if you wish, of the fact that we were having 3.6 billion of intercompany debt being repaid as a result of the merger. But it's two different phenomena that effectively occurred at the same time.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Stefano Gamberini from Equita SIM. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, everybody. Three quick questions, if I may. First of all, could you give us an idea of what was the premium you paid for Gas Connect on the RAB? I don't know if this figure, if you can disclose this figure or not, but I'm interested to understand more or less the magnitude of this premium. The second, a guidance regarding the RAB that you expect at the year-end, as well as the EBITDA that you expect at year-end, and if you can, an idea of the tax rate, mainly on 2017 after the reduction of the corporate taxation in Italy. What do you expect about it? And the third question regarding the buyback or your philosophy to invest. If I'm not wrong, now the stock is trading more or less in line with the RAB, and why you not increase the buyback or accelerate on this point of view, considering that this is probably the best investment in this moment? Thanks.
Okay, regarding Gas Connect, I think what we disclosed is what we can disclose, given also some confidentiality agreements we have with the seller as well as with our partner. We will, as we approach the closing and as we meet again, disclose as much as we can disclose on this transaction. Regarding the buyback philosophy, I think we thought of the buyback when the premium to RAB was greater. The buyback remains a tool that we want to have in our kit in order to absorb some of the liquidity that we have with our target leverage being higher than our current or expected year-end leverage. We're not in a rush to accelerate that, and we don't see the buyback as a speculative instrument to make capital gains. We see the RAB as a way to let's say strengthen our balance sheet from that point of view. On the EBITDA question,
I thought it was the RAB.
On the RAB question, I'd ask Alessandra to give you more detail.
In terms of RAB, we expect the RAB to be in the 19.5 billion euro at year end, excluding associate. In terms of associate, obviously you will have the increase of the stake in Italgas versus last year. So last year affiliates were 1.5 billion euros or 1.56. So we're going to be close to the 2 billion mark with Italgas.
Just a quick follow-up. How do you calculate this 1.56 RAB for the associate?
Sorry, say it again.
I didn't catch you the figure regarding the associate. The 1.56 value for associate. How do you get it?
It's in general terms. I think we can say it's the cost of the acquisition of those assets, generally speaking.
Okay, thanks.
So it's basically the book value and the number we discuss frequently with the rating agencies and the number that we use to assess our debt to RAB targets. So you will see the full details of that breakdown in our accounts.
Thanks.
Thank you. We will now take our last question from Anna Maria Scaglia from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Anna Maria Scaglia from Morgan Stanley. One question, if I may, still regarding Gas Connect Austria. I'm wondering why you ended up having this 40-60 JV, because when I compare, the likely investment you had done to the size of your market cap today, that's quite tiny, and therefore the incremental value creation in terms of, market cap value creation, it's not, enormous, so it's not that material. So I'm trying to understand what's the logic to acquire such a relative small stake in the company, and if you can explain that, and what you would then be willing to do in the future. I mean, are you looking for bigger acquisitions eventually, or we should expect a small size acquisition bolt on? Thank you.
Okay, Anna Maria, thanks for the question. I would say that we like the asset a lot. We think there are synergies. We don't consider 130 million a small figure for us. We are, as I said, prudent in our approach. And whereas it's a very strategic fit within our current perimeter, we've negotiated an agreement where we have equal governance rights to Allianz, and I would just say this is part of our prudent investment approach. I wouldn't use this as an indicator of what we will do in the future, nor as an indication that we are preserving firepower to do anything big. I think that was the opportunity. We optimized for that specific opportunity that makes sense in this context. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now take...
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Of course. We will now take our next question from James Brand from Deutsche Bank. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, I just had one question. You mentioned earlier in response to one of the other questions about the right target leverage for Snam in the medium term. I was just wondering if you could remind us what your target leverage is, or what you think is a reasonable level of net debt to RAB. Thanks.
That's a quick question. So we are now just north of 51%. I would say we're close to 52% at year end, if you back calculate the numbers that Alessandra has given you. And our ceiling, let's say our hard ceiling is around 60%. Our internal target is around 57%. So to go from that kind of 51.9, 52% to 57% is the flexibility that we're discussing that can be deployed for additional greenfield projects, for inorganic growth, as well as for the buyback. Thank you. Given that was a quick question, I think we maybe have room for one more, if there is one more.
There are no questions in the phone queue at this time.
Good. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.